Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jah, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be taking a closer look at United States-Liberia relations under President George Weah. We're going to examine that relationship, even go as far back as 1847 when it all got started. But we're going to zero in on Liberia-U.S. relationship under President Weah. We're going to do a short comparison with President Sirleaf because normally we hear this never used to happen early in time. So we're going to look at that relationship. And this is also coming in at a time that the U.S. ambassador, who I think the U.S. ambassador has a special relationship with Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Last year, he published an op-ed, What Will J.J. Roberts Do? This year, on the eve of J.J. Roberts' birthday, he made some noise, and we're going to talk about all that. With me to discuss Liberia-U.S. relationship is Dr. Abdullah Dukle, the man who is credited for working in the Serious Mansion, also the Salif Mansion. He also has some diplomatic experience here. Dr. Duke, welcome to Top Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm glad to be here.
I also want to welcome
also UL faculty on here.
Exactly. This UL faculty member, Dr. Duke. And my favorite part for Dr. Duke is he writes for The Perspective. And he used to love reading that. Let me also welcome FOL Public Policy Analyst, Mrs. Call, Famula Call, welcome to the show.
Always my pleasure to be here.
And want to welcome FOL Governance Consultant, Mr. Ahmed K. Salif. Mr. Salif, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
Let's do it, Dennis. It's a pleasure.
We are expecting very soon Mr. Mohammed Sharif, the guy from Kilipo Kanwakan, will be joining us. And Mohammed, just keep tight. We're going to have Mr. Mohammed come on right now so that we can do this. Well, before we get this all started, as we try to get Mr. Mohammed on, this question is let's talk about how you all doing. Let's see how everybody's doing. Let me start with Mr. Salif. How is it?
How's everybody doing personally? I'm doing well. I'm doing fabulous. It's you're healthy, your family is healthy, people around you, your community is strong. The rest of the challenges, you can turn them into opportunities. So I'm grateful. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Carl, how you doing? How's family?
Everyone's good. Everyone's good.
Dr. Duke, what are you working on?
We are preparing a wedding. My daughter Aisha is getting married, so we're getting ready. Everybody, that's all we're talking about. She's watching now. Hi, Aisha. So we're doing.
Congratulations.
Okay. Yeah. Congratulations. In order. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good. It's a good thing to give the daughter away. We also want to welcome our special guest watching tonight.
No, I'm not giving my daughter away. I'm taking somebody's boy.
Oh,
that's right.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I'm not giving my daughter away. I'm taking somebody else's boy.
Good. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is Tough Talking Thursday, where we discuss the issues that matter. And somebody was telling me, they say they were trying to compare Sunday, Friday, and Thursday show. They say the Thursday show is serious. and the Friday show is a little bit relaxed. So whether you consider it serious, but this is serious business, and let's get this started, right? Today we are talking about Liberia-U.S. relations. So let me, for someone looking at the topic, will say, okay. So let me start by asking, what does it mean for two countries, like in the case of Liberia and USA, or it could be Liberia and Ghana, Liberia and Brazil. They have relationship, or U.S. Liberia relationship. What does it mean by this U.S. Liberia relationship? What does two countries having relations entail? What does it, what does that represent? So let me start with you, Mr. Salif, to kind of break that down for us a little bit for anyone watching us.
Thank you, Dennis. This is such an important topic, so I really appreciate that you were somewhat panel to discuss this. And for welcome there, Mr. Sheriff. We're just beginning. Glad you're here. For what does it mean for two countries to be in a relationship? For Liberia and the United States, we'll come to the history. It's very unique the way it started because they didn't start until it started. So we can talk about how the relationship start. But every country engages with another country for strategic reasons. Countries, particularly the United States, their foreign policy, their diplomatic relationships are anchored on their national strategic policies, their national strategic needs. And it could be the security, the economics, it could be the private companies' interests and the interests of their people. Is really to protect and promote national interest. And then you look for other countries and other regions that will help you, whose maybe your relationship with which I guess can enhance and which you can leverage in order to advance their own national strategic strategic policy. Now, it could be a diplomatic, it could be a bilateral relationship between two countries, but there are also other types of diplomatic relationship, what they call multilateral relationships with these public international organizations, United Nations organizations, some countries, most countries in the world, at least 181 of them or so. There are more countries than that, but those are the ones that are members of the United Nations, for example. Within the UN system, there are organizations that some countries have a vested investment and interest in. There are others that don't care as much about. In terms of specifically Liberia-U.S. relationship, we all know Liberia gained independence. We'll get into history later on in 1847. The United States didn't recognize Liberia until 1862. And the relationship really began as a result of World War II, so that United States quickly recognized Liberia's strategic position, whether geographically or even politically or diplomatically, because of the history of how Liberia began. The United States then took advantage of that and began to engage with the government of Liberia militarily. It all started really with military. There are major monuments, capital investments, or in what I could call them, that were all built by the United States. So we'll have a chance to go into that. Bottom line, countries engage in relationship really for selfish reasons, I would say, again, to better and advance their own interests. And, by doing so, then you advance each other's mutual interests as strategically as we interact in the community of nations.
Thank you. Let me go to Dr. Duke. I mean, how important is this relationship, Mr. Sharif or Salif stressed some key words: mutual, bilateral, multilateral. So how important is a relationship, and on what level? Because there could be many, right? Trade relations, diplomatic. So when two countries are in this kind of relationship, what really is it? Especially when we narrow it down to the United States. And why is it important? Is it significant? And where will we see that if two countries are in a relationship like U.S. and America and Liberia, where are we going to look to see what this relationship entails? I don't know if I think I'm asking too much, but you can deal with it. If you can unmute. Dr. Duke, unmute, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying thank you, Dennis, and I think Ahmed already touched on this issue really. But for the U.S. and Liberia, I think the most important thing we have to remember, as he said, the U.S. did not recognize Liberia from at the get-go. It was just a place to dump former slaves, and in fact, up to Liberia did not become independent because Liberians, they wanted to get away from the U.S. Liberia became independent because of tax issues. Britain, the UK complained that we cannot pay taxes to a settlement. Liberia was considered to be a settlement. So they complained to the US, say, is this part of you or is not part of you? And this was 1839. The US said, well, Liberia is not part. Actually, it was Abel Asher said, Liberia does not have any political linkage with the United States. He said it, but it should be considered as an independent state. So at the time, there was governors. Everybody was appointed by the American Colonization Society. And that's important to understand that we did not have fixed relationship with the government. Everything was done by the board of the American Colonization Society that actually crafted the Republic, crafted even the Constitution was written by a Greenfield from Harvard University, brought into Liberia. And then some guy said, oh, TJ from Sino said, oh, I have my own constitution. We can write our own constitution. But he brought exactly the same paper that Greenfield had submitted. So Liberia became independent, not from the US, but from an NGO that was created by philanthropists and people who were worried about slaves' presence in America and tried to repatriate slaves to Africa. So under that condition, the US stayed on the sideline saying, we're not part of this, but our people are part of it. So people would give money to the American Colonization Society, and that's how they built up the whole system. And after independence, 1847, there was a time of sort of nationalism, if you wish, the small colony. People tended to be independent, but they were still depending on the US to be protective against the French and the British who were trying to encroach on the land. That went until, up to the 2019-20s. And then from protective became sort of a diplomatic thing. Diplomatic relations started to establish. Liberia started to trade, and it was mostly Firestone. And then we have Barclay came to the US, had the biggest reception. Tubman followed, and then we have this era where the power in Monroe and on the US protection, not military anymore, but to protect them against the native, but constantly reminding people that we are American children living in Africa. So we have a close relationship with the US. And that was the basis of the relationship. So the relationship between the US and Liberia never translated to the people level and the people to people, culturally and everything else. It was just state level, and that stayed till up to now, I think. And what do we see? Where do we see that there is a strong relationship between two nations? You're talking about trade, you're talking about culture, you're talking about security issues. All of these things come to play. If you look at Liberia, the protection the US gave during the transformative years, there's nothing now left of it. So you could say this is more a Liberian thing, fantasy. The strong relationship between the US and Liberia is more a Liberian thinking than a US perception. If you ask any politician in the US, where do you stand with Liberia? They say, where? Nigeria? No, Libya? Liberia? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, former slaves, yeah. And that's it. It started there. And I remember 1990. Yeah.
So how significant is that relationship with America? Or is it just one-sided?
I think it's mostly one-sided. Now diplomats, we've seen in the recent years since the war, diplomats try to play on it, mostly Liberian, U.S. diplomats in Liberia. I mean, Liberian diplomats in the U.S. have no real standing. I was at the embassy for 3 years. I mean, when we have reception, nobody comes from the State Department. But when U.S. celebrate July 4th in Liberia, the president goes to the celebration. That's, how you have to look at it. That's the importance. That means really it is from our point of view, it's from Liberian point of view that we have this strong relationship. But at the government level, yes, they'll talk about it, but really people to people level, economy, besides Farasun, there's no real American interest in Liberia. In the 60s, 70s, it was the CIA entry point into Africa. And that's why many black progressives from the US who ran away to Africa, who went to Guinea or Ghana. If you in Kwame Nkrumah, they never went to Liberia, although they went to Liberia to get money because they said Liberia was too close to the US. So that gives you a sense of where we came from. So this relationship is mostly dependency mentality from Liberia to the US. And the US has never really changed that part. Also, I'd say they take Liberia as granted. That is there, we can have it anytime we want to. And no president has ever resisted that. Taylor tried for a short moment, but we know where it ended.
Thank you. You started with the history. Let me go to Carl and Mohammed for more history. So this whole idea, anytime we talk about the United States, we say our traditional ally, our historical ties, and all that. And that's what even the United States, the ambassador, and everybody says the same thing. My question to you, Carl, is, first of all, why do we say that? And what does it mean? And the longest, I don't believe that the Liberia-America relationship is the longest. Maybe it is, but I want you to talk about that. But what has been the U.S.-Liberia relationship? What did it look like? What has it been over the years? Let's start from 1847. Let's look at the first 100 years of this relationship.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start at the point of the American Colonization Society.
Okay.
Although Liberia was established in 1847 as a country, the ambassador said something that sparked, outrage in many people who understand the relationship Liberia has with the U.S. He said, Liberia has been corrupt for 200 years. And Liberia clearly hasn't existed for 200 years. And I said, what is this corruption he speaks of 200 years? And then I remembered that in 1821, the U.S. government gave $100,000 in the year 1821. It's a lot of money in the year 1821 for the purpose of procuring land to settle recaptured Africans, which are the liberated Africans from unlawful slave ships that were taken across the Atlantic, and the repatriation of freemen, the free descendants of enslaved Africans that were enslaved in the United States. Those are the two groups that this money was supposed to rid the United States of this population that they did not want. This money essentially disappeared into thin air. And so I marked that moment as the first act of Western-style corruption, because they did not pay the sovereign African kings $100,000 for land. They did not give the sovereign kings $100,000 worth of goods for land, neither at Sherbro near Freetown, nor at Cape Mesurado at Providence Island. They gave them less than $500 worth of goods. These acts of corruption that were brought about by these European Americans also led to a rebellion against the colonists. After they had then taken these resources, they abandoned the Africans on the shores and to be attacked by angry sovereign Africans. Also, when this land was negotiated, Eli Ayers and Captain Stockton did not take a single African person with them on this negotiation. They left those who were supposed to be settled back at Sherbro and went as an advance team because they knew they were not going to utilize the resources correctly. More importantly, they also understood that in their home country, African people were chattel slaves. They were deeded and treated as property, no different from cows or sheep or goats. These people do not have the moral authority to condemn anyone, not then, not now. The United States' relationship with Liberia has been exactly the relationship the United States has had with its descendants of Africans who have been here since 1619. The United States has practiced Jim Crow, has practiced some of the worst segregation and racial policies on the planet. And because of the way they treated their own Black citizens, explains the way they treated Liberia. They could not recognize Liberia because they were still holding African people as chattel slaves. So to answer your question, the answer is twofold. Liberia has had a relationship with American citizens of African descent from its inception. Even those who did not repatriate to Liberia supported Liberia, the independent citizens. There was always a Back to Africa movement. There was always a Liberia Development Corporation owned by African American business people. So that relationship has always been there, and the U.S. government has always done everything it could to thwart that effort. The second part of this, the longest relationship Liberia has had with any foreign power has been with England up until the year 1843. In 1844, we went from using the British pound to, in 1843, we went from using the British pound to using the US dollar. And that again was more of an economic venture for the United States. They were now coming in to set up a southern plantation style corporate plantation. At the time, the largest plantation on the planet, the largest farm in human history was Firestone. And they used forced labor to carry out these projects, clear the rainforest. And it was not until really the late 1950s or mid 1950s that Firestone started actually compensating people and treating people with dignity. Once the plantation got off the ground, Tubman kept pushing for human rights on this plantation, and finally they started to compensate people correctly. So for this man to stand and talk to Liberians as if
we'll come to the speech. We'll come to
okay.
We laying the foundation here. Let me go to Mr. Sharif. And Mr. Sharif, welcome. Mr. Sharif just joined us. He is FOL political analyst and a proud product of WAPRO Institute all the way in Kalipo, Canada. Mr. Sharif, again, welcome. I want you to pick up where Carl left on the history. Let's look at U.S.-Liberia relationship from Tubman to Taylor. How has it been?
Well, first, Dennis, that would be very abbreviated, right? So
yeah,
let's say, let me pick up from where these erudite Liberians, these learned colleagues of mine, perhaps stop. Perhaps let me take off from there. But first, I want to say that I listened to part of the United States ambassador's speech, and I think that it was demeaning in many ways. When you go ahead and accuse, diaspora media organization.
We'll come to the speech.
Okay, all right, cool. All right.
Let's do the history first.
Okay, good. So Liberia, I think it was one of the panelists mentioned, the recognition part of it. That Liberia was recognized by the United States. Liberia independence, political independence, was recognized in 1864. After, as Carl said, the United Kingdom and France, all these different countries, European countries, have already recognized Liberia. United Kingdom was, first in 1848, France in 1852. So the United States recognition came in 1862. That's right. So in terms of a diplomatic relationship, in terms of diplomacy, and what we're speaking of now, the United States established a diplomatic relations with Liberia in 1864. So at this time, it was at the consular level. It was, it wasn't even, this sort of ambassadorial level. So it would take another 80 to 85 years for that consul, right? For that consul to be elevated to an ambassadorial level, Dennis. So that was in 1949 that the consul was elevated to an ambassador. And a guy by the name of Edward R. Dudley was the first United States ambassador. Edward R. Dudley was an African American. He was a civil rights activist. So this is very important. So it was in Liberia. So this is historic. So it was in Liberia that you had the first African American ambassador, and he was a civil rights activist. He was an attorney. This is when William V.S. Tubman was president of the Republic of Liberia. It'll be interesting to note that, during the Tubman year, FDR visited Liberia. So only 3 times in Liberian history has a sitting United States president, visited Liberia. You have FDR and you have Jimmy Carter in 1978. FDR, I think, was in 1944, 45, somewhere around there, towards the end of World War II. You have Jimmy Carter passing over, and he stopped by because Talbot said, please come see me. And then in 1978, he made that cameo appearance in Monrovia. And of course, George W. Bush in 2008, I believe it was, when he visited President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. So those are the only 3 times that the United States president have visited Liberia. So when you talk about these diplomatic relationships, there has been a lot going on. For example, when I look at George Weah, I look in the media and I see that George Weah is very much subservient to the United States ambassador to Liberia. I'm ashamed of that. Me as an African, right? Me as a proud African, just sitting here in the United States. He is someone who is very subservient to United States Ambassador McCarthy. And, I'm not a member of the administration. I'm not a member of the CDC, but I'm here. I can say to Weah, stop it. You don't have to do that. You don't have to really, really do that. And so that he's doing that is, inviting a lot of condescension from the United States ambassador, because of the way he doesn't take Weah really seriously. He doesn't take Weah seriously. Weah is not a very serious person politically. We all know that. And Weah, to these international...
We all don't know that, Mr. Sheriff.
Okay, I do know that, right? You know that, Dennis. Stop playing. You know that. So Weah is not a very serious politician, and the United States ambassador is well aware of that, and they treat him as such. And so under Tubman, right? So Weah is perhaps not the only one who has been subservient to the whims of the American, the American powers, right? Under Tubman, right? Speeches. It is alleged that some of Tubman's important speeches had to be cleared by the United States embassy in Monrovia. So Tubman was also subservient to the American powers. So Carl mentioned Firestone. I think before that, I also talked about Firestone, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So this Firestone, this is one of the exploitative companies anywhere in the world. And so who's controlling this? The American conglomerates. And Tubman and all these other people in his administration, feasted on this. So the people go out and get a large tract of our land and we get nothing for it. You know what the leadership get? The little handouts that they get what they have, what they want, and put in their pockets, build their houses, and forget about the population. So in all fairness to Mr. Weah is not the initiator of these corrupt acts, of these acts of being subservient to the American powers. It started way back. And Dennis, when Torbo tried to, deviate from the norms, the so-called norm, what happened? These guys said no. The Americans said no. The American agents said no. So when Torbo deviated, guess what happened to him? We all know what happened to him. No one has to guess. We all know what happened to him. Okay, so there was no way, especially during the Cold War, that you could have deviated from the American powers. And Torbert learned that the hard way, because Torbert was independent. Torbert, there are declassified information now that show that when Torbert came to the United States, he actually came in to speak for Africa. I have declassified information, that when Torbert spoke to, for example, President Ford, I believe in 1976, he protested the appointment of a certain Secretary of State for African Affairs. So Torbert was speaking for all of the African leaders. And when Torbert came to speak to the African leaders, he brought messages from Agnes Sékou Touré of Guinea. He brought messages from Siaka Stevens of Sierra Leone. He brought messages from the president of Guinea-Bissau, from the president of Mali. So he brought goodwill messages from his fellow leaders. And in recognition of that, Torbert was appointed, or was nominated a certain year to chair the Organization of African Unity. Those guys had the respect from the Americans. The Americans really respected Torbert. Now they didn't like him, and that's why he had to pay the price. So fast forward to you asked the question, fast forward to Mr. Taylor. By his own admission, Taylor said in Nigeria in an interview that he did not do a good job of, courting American friendship. He was asked by the journalist, do you have any regrets, Mr. Taylor? And Mr. Taylor said, my only regret is I wasn't able to break through to the Americans. So because of time, Dennis, I will leave it at that because of what Taylor said. So that encapsulates everything in the Taylor administration that you needed to know. When it came to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, finally, they took Ellen Johnson Sirleaf seriously. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is very well educated. She is a politician.
Yeah, we'll come to Sirleaf so we can compare the recent past and the current.
Okay.
But thank you for that history. Let me go to Dr. Duke here. How is the U.S.-Liberia relationship different from other relationships that Liberia has with other countries, Western countries, to be precise? How is that different? What's unique about this? On mute, Dr. Duke.
Well, I think Liberia's relation with the U.S. is different from any normal relationship between two countries. I think that's been the foundation. That's what the foundation we've been trying to lay. It's one-sided, it's dependency, and it's fear of abandonment. From the beginning, there was a fear in, quote unquote, the settlers that they will be abandoned by the U.S. And they cultivated that. Is to that point, I have to talk and it was about how do we make sure that we are seeing. Yeah, I know. I don't know why it's happening. Is it going well? We never in a relationship, adult relationship between the U.S. and Liberia. There has not been one. There has never been an we sit down and talk about issues and discuss policies and strategies and how either to develop Liberia, to develop U.S. or to change ideas and all of that. It's never happened. I remember in 2000, I think it was 2008 or 9, President Sirleaf revived a commission that was, a commission between U.S. and Liberia. It was, high-level commission where they used to meet, I think once a year or twice, every 2 years to talk about policy. It was set up by Tubman. The first meeting took place in D.C. President Sirleaf came, and Hillary Clinton was on the that was the highest level. From that when every other meeting became Liberia bringing his needs, his problems, and the U.S. discussing how to resolve them and telling Liberia how much we can find money for, how we can find money for this and that. So the commission from going a high-level strategic meeting, a commission consultation, became a Liberian begging, at the table. Liberia bring his invoices, his bills, and said, this is what we have, these are the problems. And it was, you see, that we created the same thing that Mohammed was talking about. And you can compare it to France because France has no, France has strong relationship with Liberia, so did Britain, but they never had that dependency. In fact, they were fighting Liberia at some point. And with the rest of Africa, Liberia went to a relationship because that was what you do as a nation. You cultivate a relationship with everybody. But with the US, no, it has never really functioned. Somebody was, Sirleaf was just talking about Sirleaf. I worked with Sirleaf on many, many issues, but I think her, relationship with the US was very deep, but it was also, in the same line as Tubman. It was driven by dependency mentality. It was driven by that dependency. I was there. And I say, why is the ambassador to see the president once a week, every week? You are Westman. Don't you have a foreign minister? So these things went on. So that kind of relationship we had was also the same thing. It was also the same dependency, making me look good. So whatever America agreed to, we did it. If America didn't like it, we never did it. In fact, that's why we don't, Chinese wanted to build a big hydro when we came here for investment project. But Americans said, no, we built that thing. We're going to go back and give you small light today, but big lights tomorrow, as Nancy Pelosi said, but it never came. So I don't think we want to compare them because they're totally different. Liberia has mature relationship with other countries. You don't see no country's ambassador calling, sitting in Liberia and talking about government corruption. No, you don't. Nobody does it. And can you imagine Liberian ambassador sitting here calling press conference and say, we have problem with the US, relationship with Africa or exploitation and the war in Iraq, whatever. Can you imagine Liberian ambassador saying that here? Our ambassador spent 2 years and he never met the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. He returned home, he never met him. So that tells you where we are.
Wow.
Compare, Dr. book. Dr. Don wrote something about an ambassador who was there at the time Tolbert was president. He and Cecil Dennis went to the embassy for some reason. The ambassador said, no, we can't do this. And then Dennis said, no, you can use this is our country. So they started yelling at each other. In fact, came to insulting each other, calling each other names. The ambassador went to the president. After that insulting moment, he went to President Tolbert. Tolbert said, did you say this to my minister? The ambassador said, yeah, he was yelling at me. He said, well, before I talk to you, you have to apologize to my minister because you were insulting me when you talked to him. Can you imagine that happened today? And then after he apologized, he left the office. He said, thank you. So that gives you a sense of where we were and where we are. And, so I'll stop here. But definitely, we don't have that kind of relationship with anyone. And Liberia has made itself so small mentally, everything when it comes to the US. It's mind-boggling, really different, it's very hurtful sometimes when you think about it.
Thank you.
So we don't seem to have a way out.
We'll find a way. Mr. Sirleaf, if we want to study U.S.-Liberia relationship or what we believe in, what are those conditions? Because I think it should be diplomatic, trade, and all that. Where do we find it? Where do we look? How are these things articulated for us to see, okay, this is what Liberia believe when it comes to U.S., Liberia relations? Where do we look?
Well, we look to the foundation. Like everyone has said, the foundation of our relationship with the United States is really flawed. That's where the problem began. For example, what became later the Roberts International Airport was constructed by the U.S. military in preparation for, them creating an air base essentially in World War II, so they could be able to fight in North African theater and prevent enemies from accessing South America and Asia and India, right? And then Firestone, we all know the Firestone story. The free port of Monrovia, what became the free port, the harbor that was built by the United States government, some loan, and they had a holder onto that. Continue to collect profits from it until I believe it was way later on in the Tubman presidency, right? Every major infrastructure that you can think of, Liberia College, that later became the University of Liberia, was constructed by the New York Colonization Society, essentially funds from American influence. The major road leading to the hinterland to Ganta, later connecting Liberia and Guinea, was constructed. It started with that small engineering detachment that began to train the Liberian Frontier Forces after the construction of the airport during the war. So United States forced Liberia to actually declare war on Germany to participate in the war because Liberia had declared a neutrality, right? So in diplomacy, you declare neutrality. It means that you are now a party to the conflict. You don't allow either of the sides in the conflict. That was the position. But here was Liberia. It had no serious military. It had no airport. It had no harbor. It had no major infrastructure. And so its participation in the war was really insignificant. United States forced Liberia's hand by building that military force and began to launch from Liberian territory. As a result, other countries consider Liberia an active player in the war that, in fact, had declared war on Germany, right? So that's the basis. In order to break that kind of foundation and then go back and really say, "Look, our sovereignty here," because diplomacy and mutual diplomatic relationship, bilateral relationship is based upon what's called a common recognition of each other's sovereignty, which means that I recognize you as an equal partner, as a peer, right? There are two types of diplomatic recognition. So you recognize the state, and there are conditions to recognize state as an element of so-called statehood, right? And then you recognize the government. You recognize the state as this state that as an equal partner with sovereignty, so that they and I can interact. We can establish diplomatic relations. We can establish economic, military, whatever strategic relationship that you deem necessary based upon where you see the country and see yourself in relationship to them strategically. United States does not see Liberia as a strategic partner, period. Since the war, World War II ended, United States has never seen Liberia as a strategic partner. I was reading a paper that a former Foreign Minister J. Rudolph Grimes wrote when he was a graduate student at the School of International Affairs, Columbia University. He basically was laying out how Liberia could get out of that shackle hole of the United States, preventing investment in Liberia, preventing growth in Liberia, right? He was diplomatically saying, look, every major thing, iron ore in Bombing Hills, American company single-handedly sent a single American citizen to begin that, exploiting Liberia natural resources. The university was constructed Liberian American influence, the airport American influence, the free port American influence, the major road into the country American influence. So how do you consider somebody like that an equal partner? It's never been. That's why we're seeing everything Dr. Dukla Mohammed and Co have described. That's why we're saying the way they cannot respect. President Sirleaf can come to a high-level policy dialogue in Washington, D.C., and expect that President Bush or Obama, at the time it was Obama, will come there, right? Because it had never been that way. It was America dictating to Liberia, and Liberia did exactly what the United States told Liberia to do.
Mr. Sharif, I heard the President Weah say his ambassador to the U.S., Joe, or I don't know why I always Louis Brown. I always say Joe Moore, but Louis Brown was fired because he didn't vote with United States. So we keep, most of you mentioned this one-sided relationship, but does the U.S. have any equal relationship with any other African country? So, U.S. treat Liberia the same way treat other African countries. What's the difference here?
U.S. I don't know if you're asking whether other African countries are treated this way. Or
Yeah. I mean, U.S. and other African countries are not equal in their relationship, right?
Right.
Same as Liberia.
Yeah, so if I'm getting that right, I mean, Liberia, throughout this discussion now, everybody is saying the same thing. Liberia is not treated on an equal footing. So this is not, the principle of reciprocity, right? So this is not, and this is, we're not equal, right? So that's their interpretation. So the question they always have, even if it's not, expressed outwardly, is what do you have? So the United States, everything is based on their interest, U.S. interest. What is U.S. interest? So for example, the United States is in the Middle East. They're going to be entrenched in the Middle East for a long, long time to come, especially in the Gulf. What is there? They have oil. So so you have you may have a Saudi prince who will butcher a journalist, and nothing will come off of it. Both parties, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Nothing will come off of it because the Saudis have oil. So in Liberia, it's different. So George Weah is treated as, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, like a baby, like a child of the U.S. Ambassador to Liberia. George Weah is not important in the eyes of the United States ambassador to Liberia. Maybe if he's watching this now, because they follow these media, these media outlets from the diaspora, he's going to disagree. But that is the case, and this is not an exaggeration, because what he's saying now is that the diaspora news outlets are exaggerating. It's not an exaggeration. So all you have to do, you listen to his speeches, you watch, you read the newspapers, you see, you look at pictures. Then this is how we draw a conclusion. Look at the pictures. Look at how, when you juxtapose, when you see George Weah and the United States ambassador, who's looking directly, who's looking directly up, who's looking down. So these are the things. Look at these. The symbolism is it's it's unbelievable how an ambassador is treating the president of a sovereign nation this way. And I think that there's something to be said for that. And George Weah, Mr. Dr. Dukla mentioned something just now, about the official in the Tobo administration, right? So Cecil Dennis, these guys like Cecil Dennis. I mean, these weren't people. These are people who were very much. I mean, they were, not only that they were intellectual, but they were very much respected within the realm of African diplomacy, within the realm of international world diplomacy, everywhere in the world. So you couldn't do, there were certain things that you could not do as an American envoy. But now, not only that these guys, the United States ambassador, United States envoy, disrespect the president of the Republic of Liberia, they also, further that by disrespecting the entire Liberian nation state. So at any moment, the United States ambassador can, call a press conference, and condemn all of us. This is unacceptable. Something that should be coming from our administration, now is coming from the United States Embassy. So now the United States Embassy is the outlet through which, policies are driven, almost. You can't make that case. And this is disturbing. It is not, for me, it's not acceptable that you have a United States ambassador who's consistently interfering in Liberia's affairs. But then again, you know, you have a president who does not take himself seriously, a president who thinks that.
Mr. Sharif, how is that different from when President Salih was in office?
You know, look, there was a difference. I mean, you know, I
call prepared to answer that question too.
I didn't work in the administration, but you know, we all saw that there was a difference. It's night and day from what's going on now. You know, when Sirleaf came, when you saw, you know, we all watch television, we all follow social media. When you saw the discussions that they will have, not the ones behind closed doors that we weren't privy to, but the open discussions that they will have, you know, the exchange of ideas, you know, all these different things that used to go on in public, there were a great deal of respect between Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and President George W. Bush and his successor, Barack Obama. So, I mean, now it's different. Dennis, look how long it took for Weah to be invited to the White House, because for Liberian president, that's a big deal for them to be invited to the White House. Look how long it took for George Weah to come to the White House. You know how he came because of the Liberia Africa Summit, and because the United States is trying to push back on Russian influence in Africa. So George Weah benefited from that. If that wasn't the case, I don't think George Weah would have had an opportunity to come to the United States to meet with the United States president. And when George Weah came to the United States, what was the first? When he came concretely, what did Liberia get out of George Weah's visit to President Biden? What concretely did we get out of it? Nothing. You got photo ops. You got your president standing with the president of the United States for a photo op. You got people like, you know, Jefferson Coolidge and all these other people, you know, roaming around, you know, looking for American officials for photo ops. So these are the officials that we have. They don't take themselves seriously. And because they don't take themselves seriously, so the Americans do not take you seriously. So compounding all of this, as I said, they don't take themselves seriously, but we don't have what it takes. In the eyes of the American, you know, the United States government, we don't have what it takes. So they don't have right now. They don't have they don't seem to have a real strategic interest, other than the fact that China and Russia are making inroads into Africa. They feel like, you know, Africa, they are losing their grips on Africa, so they have to re-engage. If it wasn't for them, you know, they won't go back for much. I mean, there's no oil. You know, there hasn't been any discovery of oil that I know of. Once you have that, I think you have the Americans more engaged into Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you. Carl, we are discussing U.S.-Liberia relations under President Weah. How different was it under President Salih? Or it's been the same? Most of you have alluded to that the relationship, you know, started on the faulty ground, and it's been like that ever since. So what's different when we look at the last 12 years under President Salih and what the relationship look like now? More of the same or what?
So the first thing I want to do is to make a couple of points of correction. The first thing is the United States did not economically annex Liberia until 1943, 1944 under FDR. Before that, we used the British pound. England was our strongest trade partner, and then Germany. After the partitioning of Africa in 1886, and our strategic trade partners started fighting to basically annex us politically and basically take away our sovereignty, we started trying this game of playing one power against another to try to maintain our sovereignty. So it wasn't the United States doing everything for Liberia since its inception. In fact, the United States completely abandoned Liberia to fend for itself on many occasions. We lost mass amounts of territory. The other thing I want to clarify is the United States was not a world power when Liberia was established. These colonies, or these colonization programs, all these state-run colonization programs were operating independently. Some of them did not have federal government sponsorship, were privately sponsored. And Britain also settled a lot of its former subjects to Liberia, and also a lot of recaptured Africans to Liberia as well. So the way we see the world organized today is a 20th century phenomenon. Liberia is an 18th century creation. It was almost 100 years after Liberia became independent that we start using U.S. currency and become an economic extension of the United States. Why does that happen? It happens because the U.S. is vying for power. The administration of Hoover was the administration that made a decision that Europe is powerful. Many of these European powers are powerful because they have an economic reserve in Africa. And he felt that Liberia should serve as an economic exploit for the United States. And that is exactly what it became. So when you see the economic embargoes that occurred all throughout the 19th and early 20th century, once the United States gets its claws in Liberia, the economic embargo turns into economic exploitation. Just full on, you're now a economic colony. You no longer have economic freedom. We are going to use your resources for our benefits. Firestone rubber was one of the greatest catalysts to lift the United States into a position of power. The rubber from Firestone, the Ford Motor Company, the tires, the farm machines, the war machines, all of these mechanisms that made the United States a world power were fueled by Firestone rubber. There's many books written about this. So Liberia has been extremely important to not only the U.S. economy, but to their position in fighting the Cold War. Now, talking about Sirleaf and Weah, listen, President Sirleaf is extremely educated, articulate, and she understands the world. She is not someone who's a novice to world politics. And she knew what to say, who to say it to make sure things got done. At no time is Liberia going to be allowed to grow its own food until we recognize that we're only supported when we grow cash crops. At no time is Liberia going to be able to create another economic venture like Meserauda groups of companies until we realize it is not in other people's interest for us to do so. One of the struggles that we have is recognizing what is choking us. We refuse to speak it a lot of times. We refuse to recognize it for what it is. I don't know what if it's just, we're living in denial. President Weah, I don't think he even has the capacity to grasp all of these things that are going on. He has never articulated anything that I'm aware of that even has a semblance of a person that understands things. And so for the U.S. ambassador to completely come out with this very racist, really condescending, racist rhetoric towards another country, no matter how our current situation is, you must recognize our humanity, first and foremost. And secondly, you must recognize our sovereignty. In his speech and in his disrespect, he not only threw our sovereignty, out the window. He threw our dignity, our humanity out the window. You're talking to human beings, adults. You're talking to functioning human beings. No matter how competent or incompetent the president is, you are still talking to human beings. And he thinks that he is some kind of father figure for us. This is an outrage. And I alluded to it earlier. Having the audacity to talk about corruption in Liberia, corruption is a Western cultural tenet. This is something that they invented. We are just weak mimics of their behavior. I mean, corruption is usually conducted through bribery. Even the aid they gift is tainted with corruption. It's almost bribery. So you give aid so that the leaders can fight and frenzy over this. It's a form of bribery. And then you can come in and do whatever you want. Oh, we gave you aid. So now we're going to open up this. We're going to do that. And we're going to extract this. We're going to extract that. And you're going to do exactly what we said. And more importantly, we gave you aid. So when you come to the UN, you're going to vote in favor of Israel. You're going to do exactly what we do. It is a form of corruption. That in itself, our whole relationship with the United States is a form of bribery and extortion and corruption. And I dare this man to explain how he can possibly absolve the United States of practicing or participating in any act of corruption that has happened in Liberia since its inception. I mean, since 1943, 1944. The fact that we use U.S. currency is an act of corruption on the part of the United States. It's part of the economic annexation of our country. And we sit here today and act like it's normal. It's not normal. We shouldn't be having someone slap us in the face and then tell us, oh, why are you crying? You know, it's like you created the system. It was an act of war. It was an act of war under any other circumstances. If our humanity was recognized the way it should be, if our sovereignty was recognized the way it should be, the economic annexation of Liberia would be recognized as an act of war. And that's all I have to say about that. So President Sirleaf, how she's relating to the U.S., how we as relating to the U.S., it doesn't even matter. You know, of course she's going to be more dignified and all of these things. She's President Sirleaf. You know, she is one of the greatest African women to ever share the same time and same space as those of us on this panel. So we expect her to conduct herself a certain way. But it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference when we're still economically annexed and controlled with aid.
Yeah. Carl, if you, Linda Greensfield under President Sirleaf and McCarthy under President Weah, not much different. Would you agree?
I don't agree with that. I think Madam Greenfield, for the very least, recognized that we're human beings, and that she never one day spoke of Liberia in historical context the way that this man does, and that's really a testament. And this is why I use the word racism. You know, this is that air that only apartheid countries have, right? So you have this among white South Africans, you have this among white Australians, you have this among white Americans, this idea that they are the world saviors and that all the other people should be under their feet. They have no rights that any white man is bound to recognize. This is the air this man is giving off. This is what I hear when I hear him saying things like, you know, I need to tell you people what to do and I am the authority. And we're sitting here clapping for this. You know, and Greenfield, at no time, I was in Liberia the entire time she was ambassador. At no time did she disrespect our sovereignty or our humanity the way that this man has. There's no comparison.
Thank you. And let's jump into the ambassador's speech. Dr. Duke, I'm coming to you there. Last year, there was J.J. Rawo's birthday, and the same ambassador said this about what on the speech up air. What would J.J. Rawo do? He said, "Would Liberia's first president have imagined that 175 years after independence, foreigners should be held responsible for the removal of garbage in his capital city?" That was a jab to Koji. In other words, J.J. Rawo they saying, "Hey, your city is dirty, and you want somebody." This time now, he says, almost a year later, he said corruption has been part of Liberia for over 200 years. And Carl calls that racism. Again, he said,
not just that, but the entire context of the speech.
Today, again, he said, "Today I'm ashamed to tell you that the most irresponsible controversies to emerge in Liberia over the past month media have originated from the United States." And we went on and on, you know. He's even talking about FGM and everything that Mr. Dr. Drew.
Oh my God, it's an outrage. Sorry.
You know, it would be funny if you were not coming from the U.S. ambassador. It would be like, oh, well, he's stupid or he's dumb. But then again, he's acting like a governor. You know, the ACS governor who used, you know, tell the government, hey, you guys do this, native, you guys sit there, and then this is how we're going to run this country. And that's what he's doing. The administration is not saying anything. But beyond that, I don't want to dwell onto, you know, because everybody talked about that. We've been talking about it for days. One thing that interested me in that whole speech, when he went and condemned the diaspora, the next sentence starts with, "I praise George Weah government." And I'm thinking in my head, conspiracy theorists. I remember 1985 when U.S. started, quoting Doe. I said, what's going on? Because that's what, I'm a speechwriter. One sentence you say, I'm ashamed because the diaspora does that. The next sentence you say, I praise Weah, somebody you had never praised before since you came to the country. I said, what is happening in the U.S. policy? What is happening? Because it's not, they don't just write these things for, like that. People go over it. And this is a policy change that we must pay attention to. Doe was pushed under the throat of Liberians in 1985 because U.S. needed him at the time. They bothered him, they flew him, they dined him, everything. And now I think something is going on. The ambassador he didn't just insult us. He gave us something to think about. He insulted the diaspora, the only group of people who can really see it objectively and talk about Liberia. Although we're now on the ground, but we know everything that is going on. And most of us who speak about Liberia have worked in the government, have been there sometimes, and we talk to people every single day, including we hear from him and the ambassador. So for him to go make a whole speech where he never raised any of the single issues that have been in Liberia for the last 4 or 5 weeks, from the budget to the census, to the killing of the daughter of Mususka, to Akaris Gray on the university campus. None of that interests him, except live from the diaspora, something going on. Think about it seriously. And okay, you were talking about the insult part of it. Every American officials have been going to the U.S. For the last 6 months. The Secretary of State, Janet Link, the Secretary of Treasury, this and that. Who goes to Liberia? The corruption czar. We don't see none of that. And there were military operation between Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and the U.S. troops. Liberia was not part of it. We were not invited. So, read again the ambassador's speech. If you are 1980s, this is what happens slowly. Be careful.
Dr. Doe, and you say that's conspiracy?
Huh?
Are you calling what you are saying conspiracy?
Yeah, conspiracy.
All right. Let's take a short break and play an excerpt from the ambassador's speech, so that and then after that, I want Mr. Salif to come in.
I would like to know from the press. First, in both our U.S.-funded media training and in our messaging to the press, we spend a lot of time emphasizing responsible journalism. That with freedom of expression comes an obligation to verify facts and to not inflame passions without first doing due diligence. Today, I am ashamed. I'm ashamed to tell you that the most irresponsible controversies to emerge in Liberia's media over the past month have originated from the United States. While responsible, critical observations from the Liberia diaspora can be healthy, some cowardly media personalities and political personalities have intentionally disseminated rumors and misinformation into Liberia's political environment from the safety of their studios and offices in the U.S. And these people are motivated by disruption and a desire to break down trust in Liberian institutions. They don't care what damage they cause. And when questioned by law enforcement, they do not have evidence to back up their claims. Unfortunately, they take advantage of America's First Amendment rights to spread rumors, back up their claims. They take advantage.
Wow. Mr. Salif, is he, what are we saying here? Is he telling a lie or is not his place? What are we saying?
No, it's not a question of whether or not he's telling a lie. Look, we do have problems in Liberia. we do have problems with forms of corruption in our country. The way we have failed to grow the agriculture sector, to grow manufacturing, to move the country forward. We've failed to govern in a lot of strategic areas that could have put us on a different footing today. We've nurtured a culture of corruption. We have to say, whether we learned it from ourselves or we learned it from how our foundation was established with this country, the United States of America. A lot of the vestiges of the early days, the things we've discussed historically are happening today. They continue to really bedevil our country, to bedevil whether or not we move forward. We haven't been able to get out of that. Compounded with our own kind of other types of structures that we have, whether it's tribalism, regionalism, other vices that we could have leveraged positively. Instead, we've chosen to negatively engage with. Yes, we do have all of those problems, granted. What we are talking about is whether or not a diplomat who is sent to another country, a sovereign country, is behaving appropriately. Whether or not this diplomat is engaging in racism, is condescending upon these people. Whether this diplomat sees us as human beings, as equals, right? As the people who can sit at the same table and talk about policy, talk about strategic partnering to benefit both of our countries. That is not how it has been between Liberia and United States. It will never be like that today because of the way, the mentality, that mental model that, look, you come here, you're the American ambassador, you basically run this place. Right? You tell them, you can threaten them with sanctions. You can withhold visa from people because we know they all want to go to America. They have some kind of relationship there. They have their children there, their relatives there, and they exude prestige when they go to America, when they're able to go back and forth between Liberia and America. And we don't grant them visa. We can actually condescend upon them, tell them anything we want to tell them. That's what we're saying, Dennis. It's not a question whether or is he right or is he not right? I want to say, I think it's a Nigerian author. I forgot, I read this article a long time ago. Ackerman. I don't think Ackerman is a Nigerian, but this writer says that United States has a moral obligation to look back and correct some of the moral decadence, some of the inhumanity it has carried on against the people of Liberia, against Liberia over these centuries, over these years, over these decades. That to say we're here, we have a development purse for you. We can invest in. Well, by the way, over the last 30 years, we've invested $800 million, $500 million, Tottenham era, and this era and that era. This author says that is the slap in the face because all the resources that the United States has taken away from Liberia and from the Liberian people, and the way it has controlled diplomatic influence and diverted other people from coming to partner with Liberia, the United States has the obligation to actually come and say, look, all right, we're responsible to help you rebuild, and we're going to do it in a significant way. We're engaged in this way, we're engaged in that way, but that is not happening. They pretend that this is a normal diplomatic relationship, and yet it is not. It's not on paper, it's not in practice. I'll conclude with one thing. Aside from the history we've looked at, this is still part of the history. If you look at President Tubman, you look at President Tubman fought that a little bit. We all have agreed that kind of the result is what we saw because he really stood up and said, look, we'll do something. We're not saying we won't be a friend, but we want to be equal in this friendship. And they didn't like that. We said, do say this at the United Nations, befriend this person, don't befriend this region, participate in this other alliance, and not this one. President Tubman refused to do that, and we all know the result. But with President and then Samuel Doe, right? It was a client state. Liberia, they basically, gave Tubman money and told him what to do. They gave Doe money and told Doe what to do. And when President Doe later on began to ally with Libya and try to get out of that, we saw the result as well. So, it's not a question, Dennis, to come back to your question on whether or not he's right or wrong. We're not here to absolve ourselves, our Liberian politicians and this government of the ills that are happening in the country, the poverty and some of the misrule that are happening in the country. That is not the subject of the discussion tonight. I think the question really is, how does the United States of America see Liberia and Liberians?
And Cole, you think the language used is reflected in the U.S.-Liberia relationship? You think that's what is projecting, or this is one off?
So he has what we call a white racial identity. We call it white racial identity syndrome or attitude, right? There's this false sense of supremacy and this idea that they are in existence to not only save, but that they have dominion over the world. And all of the people in the world are there to not only learn from them, but to be controlled by them and exploited by them. So he doesn't even come into diplomacy with a mindset that he's dealing with co-equals as human beings, while the country he represents is tremendously more powerful and wealthy than Liberia. Its diplomacy is also you have to recognize the humanity of the people in the country that you're dealing with as well. That is not done. People keep talking about Ambassador Greenfield. Before the U.S. diplomatic representative to Liberia was officially an ambassador, we've always had them. You watch the History Channel. At the time they were called ministers to Liberia were always African American, and they always worked and tried to go back and advocate for U.S. relationships, trade relationships, tried to get American citizens to trade with Liberian citizens, and all of these kinds of things. This particular person is not there for that. He ought to be apologizing for what his country has done to Liberia. He ought to be sorry, not because a few overzealous, opposition people or whoever is crazy on the internet, attacking Liberia. He should be rather apologizing that the United States government created a disinformation campaign where they erased Liberian history intentionally distorted our history. It's clearly documented now because we have freedom of information, and we're able to see some of the greatest lies ever told. And this was all part of their propaganda scheme to try to destabilize our country, to try to pit us against one another, to widen wedges. And every time we strive for any kind of economic self-determination, as soon as you see the Maserati group of companies or any other Black-owned enterprise, they have to die. Patrice Lumumba had to die. Thomas Sankara had to die. Tolbert had to die. All the time, Doe was misguided and doing bad things to Liberia. The moment Samuel Doe becomes an actual president and sees himself as a president and tries to do something for his country, he too must go. They never kill corrupt presidents. They never involve the CIA in killing corrupt presidents. They always go after the ones who are seeking the interests of the citizens. And then we sit here and say, oh, well, our leaders are so terrible. Our leaders are dead. They've killed them all. And every time one tries to put their head up, they've got us so conditioned that we only have choices, mediocre choices left. And this is the most unfortunate thing. McCarthy had rather open his mouth and apologize and be ashamed of the racist and evil conduct, not only against Liberia, but against its own Black citizens. Because really, Liberia is just a reflection of what America has done to its own African American citizens. And then some. I mean, they had forced labor in the United States in the South and sharecropping the same time they were forcing labor in Firestone. It is an absolute reflection of each other. They had segregation at Firestone. They opened the plantation. There were places that the Africans couldn't go, and the white workers had their golf courses. We never had that in Liberia before. America brought that to Liberia. So let's really tell the truth. He ought to apologize. That he ought to be talking about reparations is what he should be talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif. You know, I was preparing for the show and talking to people. They say, well, those in the diaspora are only talking now because the ambassador hit on them, right? That's one thing. Another group say, well, if you cook yourself in a buttercup, they will dish you up with bamboo stick, right? So this is how we have carried ourselves. That's why when the ambassador is talking, I mean, he doesn't see the humanity that all of you are speaking about. The next point I want to also ask you is the polarization in our politics. Does it have anything to do with this? Because when the ambassador or any foreign dignitary speaks, when they speak against the government and you are opposed to the government, you say, you go right on. And if it is the other way, if you're for government, you say, oh, no way. So how has the polarization in our politics has not helped us, or has it contributed to people like Mr. McCarthy or the ambassador talking this way?
Yeah, tremendously. Dennis, keep in mind, when the sanction was imposed on these very corrupt guys who serve, and incompetent guys who served George Weah, who were the people who were cheering for, the opposition said more sanction will come. Not that we will ensure that you, George Weah, that we're going to render this country ungovernable by bringing our people into the streets of Monrovia and Kipamas and Von Gemma and Banga and all these places, Bommy Hills and all these places. Not that, but more sanctions will come because we're going to ask the United States to bring more sanctions. So your question is well in place. It has a lot to do with it. And Dennis, keep in mind, in 1980 also, in the lead up to the bloody military coup of 1980, the fissures, the division within the Liberian political class, between the political elite that served William R. Tolbert and the Liberian populace as a whole. So Liberia was significantly divided between this sort of native and Congo, or native and so-called American Liberians. And what did the Americans do? They found a way. It is alleged that some of the progressives, some of the opposition leaders were invited into. I don't have any evidence of this. I'm still trying to get some more information on this. That they visited they were in the United States Embassy prior to their arrest. And if someone in the progressive community can come out and talk more about this, I'll be happy to be a listener. But Bacchus Matthews, some of the guys were invited by the United States ambassador to the American embassy, and we haven't had any information on what these guys were doing there in the embassy. And when they came out of the embassy, they haven't told us, none of them, because these guys don't write books and stuff like that. Some of them even don't write newspaper articles. So they die with this kind of information. So there is information out there that the Americans were involved. So they were culpable in what happened in 1979, and they were culpable in what happened in 1980. The Americans have not explained how 17 uneducated military men who did not know the geography of the executive mansion, they're going to just burst into the executive mansion and assassinate the president who was asleep. This is something that have not been explained to us. So for a very long time, the Americans have destabilized Liberia, and this is something that's not talked about. Someone else, one of the panelists mentioned that, they only keep, and I was laughing, that they only keep corrupt leaders and stuff like that. Yes, you have to look at Mobutu Sese Seko, who murdered and butchered Patrice Lumumba and put him in a whole drum of sulfuric acid, along with the Belgians and the French who have blood on their hands. Mobutu was allowed to rule for over 30 years. Nasimba Iyadema, who launched the first military coup in West Africa, he was allowed to govern for over 35 to about 40 years. Now he has his son in there as president. These are corrupt dynasties that, the United States also created for us in Liberia. So Dr. Duke, I'm learning something from you very much, sir, because you mentioned something that's something that we have to look at, because when the United States ambassador come out to condemn the diaspora news media outlets, and in the same space praise George Weah, they are looking for something from George Weah. And you know what happened? After that speech, what happened? I think it was after or before that speech. What happened? You have the University of Liberia incident. You have a lawbreaker marching onto the campus of the University of Liberia and brutalize students of the University of Liberia. Have you heard?
You mean lawmaker, Mr. Sharif?
What's that?
You mean lawmaker?
I really mean lawbreakers.
Okay.
These guys, they are lawbreakers. Okay, they were elected to be lawmakers, but they are lawbreakers. That we should call them for who they are. And the problem with Liberia is that we sort of glorify individuals who shouldn't be glorified. We sort of honor and bow down to individuals who should not be honored and who we shouldn't bow down to. These guys, if you take private militia, if you walk around Monrovia, private militia, and invade the campus of the University of Liberia and beat on students, create chaos, you are a lawbreaker. You're not a lawmaker. And you are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. You get hundreds of thousands of dollars for working for the Liberian people. You get hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're a millionaire for doing what you did. It's a shame. And Dennis, there is a dichotomy. So we can discuss two things at the same time. And I'm ready to do that. We are now talking about what the United States is doing. And some people will say what the United States should do for us. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that we should be sitting here talking about what the United States should do for us. I think we should do for ourselves. Liberia is a very wealthy country. Why is it that this country is not among the wealthiest countries in Africa? Because you have people who have no business being leaders of Liberia. You have people who have taken public service as a conduit to enrich themselves, as a conduit to be able to purchase themselves mansions in Europe, mansions in the United States, and saving millions of dollars outside of the country. You have individuals who are very wealthy on the public largesse. This can never happen. So we are also responsible. We can't leave ourselves out of this. We're also responsible for our own problems in Liberia. If we are doing the right thing, Thomas Sankara laid this out for all African leaders to see. But they don't see because of greed and incompetence and nepotism and all of the different vices that come with it.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, I don't think it should be all doom and gloom. What's the light at the end of the tunnel? What can we do about this? Let's say if we want a better U.S.-Liberia relations, if we want this to be on equal footing, if we want the ambassador and other U.S. Government officials to respect us and talk to us as equal, what do we do?
We'll recalibrate our foreign policy. We actually have a real foreign policy that is based on serious domestic policies. Like we have to have strategic reasons to attract not just the United States. United States, we're discussing it in this way because of the injurious relationship that he has had, so-called historic ties with Liberia. But I believe, all of these things we're talking about, Ambassador McCarthy doing or altering against Liberians, could have been discussed behind closed doors. That's how diplomats behave. If you see a situation that you think warrants the attention of your country, because they're also there to protect the interests of U.S. citizens and U.S. companies, U.S. businesses, and serve U.S. citizens who are in Liberia. And therefore, a diplomat is under obligation to write cable back to their capitals and say, oh, these things are happening there. They issue these alerts on the website, on embassy websites. Other embassies do that as well. Not to the extent of the US, but other embassies do that. To the point I'm making is, yes, you have concern, some of these things that you make into public remarks, go behind, engage with your counterparts, right? We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, last time I checked on their website, they didn't even really have any serious foreign policy there. They're talking about, foreign policy philosophy is based in this, and there's nothing solid that tells me, okay, this is Liberia's foreign policy together. And I can look at this foreign policy direction and say it's based on the government's desire to accomplish XY strategic interests domestically. That is where the problem is, right? We have to get a hold of that. And then establish ourselves as a strategic partner. We do have, we keep saying Liberia is a rich country, which is why these foreign powers are coming to exploit Liberia. We can leverage that, train our people, position them to really be strong negotiators and advocates for the country. And we have to be seen to be serious ourselves, serious in the sense of what are we trying to do to lift our people out of poverty, to correct some of these misrules and some of these, institutional and governance challenges that we're seeing. That's how you begin to be taken seriously, right? And we should start looking for alternatives and just stop looking at everything is America, everything is the United States. Once the U.S. says this, that's it. If the U.S. doesn't say this, then we can't move, right? So why the Americans are now trying to come back to Africa and take some African governments and African countries seriously because of the Chinese and because of the Russians on the continent, right? The Chinese are in Liberia as well. And so, we can position ourselves and say, look, listen, we're diversifying, right? We are a country that has resources and has serious people. We are cultivating our people, we're cultivating our land, and we're looking to who has our interest.
We tried that before, right? Non-aligned movement. Remember?
Yeah, no, not quite. I mean, non-aligned movement was sort of a political, it was during a specific period. So during the Cold War, so during, coming out of World War II kind of situation, yes, we had to say, oh, well, we don't want to be part of this Cold War and what's happening between the West and the Soviet Union. And so we want to be non-aligned, right? So we tried that, and our president got killed as a result. What I'm suggesting here is to really look internally and say, what is wrong with us? Why aren't we moving this country forward? What can we do to lift our people out of poverty, to build inclusive institutions, to really build rule of law system and cultivate that culture change mindset, and begin to, cultivate our natural resources and use it for the growth of the country. You do that, I can guarantee you'll start seeing foreign direct investment, American companies, trying to come to Liberia, and then we can negotiate. We can be serious negotiators across the table from one another.
Thank you. If you want to join the conversation, the number is on the screen, 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Carl, how do we move forward? How do we turn things around?
So America, we have to educate our population, and it needs to be a strategic education process. Human capital development, our most important resource is our human beings. Of all of the wealth that they have taken out of Liberia, the most critical element of this is the human capital flight. This is dangerous for any country. The United States is great today because it steals other people's human resource. I mean, since the transatlantic slave trade, though now it's voluntary, that is what makes America great. Liberia needs to stall and reverse this process. That needs to be at the top of the list, not excluding people from leadership, petty arbitrary things, excluding people, because, these are the people that are going to draft the policies. You cannot be xenophobic about your own people. The country was built on the principle of repatriating some of the best and the brightest people. And I also want to say, we have to also recognize through this process that there's a new scramble for Africa. They're not, the United States and other Western powers are not competing with the East, with China, because they want to have a fair chance to trade with us. They're competing with them to exploit us. We are consumers and we are a place to extract resources from. We are not equal partners to trade with. And until that happens, these fights over us resemble and reflect what was happening in the 19th century when they were scrambling over our resources. It's no different. So it's not like they're coming to Africa to say, oh, hi, we're going to have fair trade. If you listen to that nonsense conference they had in DC last year, the entire premise of that conference was we need new markets. They're looking at us as consumers. They want to come and sell things to us. They want to exploit us. They're not trying to develop trade networks. We need to start reaching out to the Caribbean. We need to start reaching out to our neighbors. We need to start trading directly with people who are going to respect us. And most importantly, that human capital development, because the problem solvers, the solution finders are going to be the people who are educated and not brainwashed. They're going to be the people who are taught how to think properly and not regurgitate Western ideology and perpetuate imperialist thought. So we have to be sure that we're instilling a sense of self-esteem in our young people, that they know that they're capable of doing better. And part of that process is resurrecting our profoundly triumphant history that they have tried to hide and bury from us. There are so many things that happened in America that were horrible, but every child in America is raised with the triumphant stories of the United States. Why is that? It's because they don't want Americans to hate America. In Liberia, we bury the triumphant stories and we harp on anything we can harp on to turn us against each other. Those are the things we need to reverse through strategic civics education, revamping our curriculum, and lifting the spirit and the mindset of our people so that we know the solution to every issue that we have lies within our population, within our citizens. We already have everything we need to manifest our destiny is already in us. We have to bring it out. It is not going to come from somewhere else. No one's coming to save us but us.
Thank you. And we have a lot of callers waiting in the wing. So quickly, Mohammed and then Dr. Duke, what do we do now? I'm sure we're not doomed. Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, I mean, by no means. I mean, we're not doomed. It starts with electing people who are competent. I can't overemphasize this enough. When you look at a celebrity and you say this celebrity can lead your country that is not far removed from the Civil War, you're asking for trouble. This man didn't explain any platform to you. He didn't give you anything. He didn't say anything. He didn't communicate one word. He shied away from all the debates, and yet you elected him. And now you want to be surprised by the outcome of it? You elected Akaris Gray. You elected all these people that are walking around breaking the rules that they themselves are supposed to make and enforce. So this is where our culpability comes in, because we elected these people. In fact, we should go ahead and vote all of them out the next round if this is possible, right? And then get a do-over, someone who is going to stand to these guys to say, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. So-and-so, this is our country. You're going to negotiate based on our terms, not your term. Because what is going on now, Cole mentioned the new scramble for Africa. Absolutely. Now you have China. You're going to have China-Africa Summit, the Russian-African Summit, the United States-African Summit. Sooner or later, you're going to have the Middle East African Summit. You have the Israelis coming in now. They're opening their embassies in some of these African countries. They're moving into Africa. So we are up for grabs. And Dennis, as an African, it is a shame that every single time you listen to news, you watch the news, your continent is up for grabs for the highest bidder. You just go everywhere the money is. And a politician said recently, our policy is based on, domestic policy is based on theft, and our international policy is based on begging. And that summarizes the whole thing.
Thank you, Dr. Duke.
Yeah, I would, say to get out of this, I think the problem, we have two solutions. The diaspora, we can all return home like South Africa did at the end of the apartheid, and they went back and took over the country. That's one solution. But the longest term solution is really education, to correct our mindsets, to go out of this crisis of identity, because that's what we have. We have a real crisis of identity. We don't know who we are. People don't, can you imagine, you're a tourist, you go to Monrovia, you say, oh, Matila Nipo, that was one of you big people in the country. Yeah, your history. We have that street there. Kids wake up every day. I'm going to Nipo Street. Who's Nipo? Who was she? A character, a fiction. So we live that. So we bury the culture of the majority to embrace something that we don't really understand, that people don't know how to relate to. And then on top of that, we've been alienated to America. America is the heaven, is the end of it, is the father, is the mother, the milk, the everything. So unless we come back to face that issue of identity and educate Liberian children into that identity and grow a new generation, we will always have the same problem. Why do opposition leaders go to the embassy? Every time somebody write a press release, they say we call on the international community. The international community is nobody but the U.S. They go to the U.S. embassy. They write a press release. The first thing they do, go to the U.S. embassy. If the government wants to do something, the first thing they do, they call a consul from the U.S. embassy. We want to do this. So we are trapped into a vase. We are trapped into a vase culturally. And if you don't free your mind, you're not going to do it. Because every day is going to be touch and go, touch and go. Why do we elect a guy like George Weah, who never made a speech, who never attended what do you call it, a debate to say, these are my ideas? Why? Because it doesn't matter in the end. Because smartness doesn't matter. Ideas don't matter. Thoughts don't matter. What matters is what is fake. And fake works well with people who don't have any identity because you jump at anything. And that's where we are. I think that's where we need to start from. Because we can return home. More of, we have taken habits that we cannot forego overnight. So we're not going to go home and then start running for water and then looking for electricity. No. But we can make sure that the next generation is better educated. And that's where we fail.
And the education to change Liberia starts from here, right here on Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and
oh yeah. And before you go to the phone line, just 1 second, I keep forgetting. You know why the embassy of Liberia is on 16th Street? Because when Liberia came, say we want to open our embassy, they say, well, you know what? 16th Street, yeah, that's where the black people go. Because all the slaves who built the White House and the mall were given land on 16th Street area. And they decided that's what Liberian Embassy is on 16th Street, not on Embassy Road. Just piece of history. Let's go.
Wow.
They can't put us with the white people. We got to be on our side with where black people, former slaves live, which is 16th Street. That was their corridor.
Thank you, sir, for that.
Thank you. Let's take our first caller to be part of the conversation here. And anybody can guess who is he?
Elvis Morris.
Mr. Morris, you are live. Thank you for being so punctual.
Elvis is a nice guy.
But thank you, Mr. John. I guess I'm too predictable.
No, we like that. We appreciate you. We appreciate you.
This has been one of the more sombering shows you've had in a long, long time, and very informative. And I think quite passionately, all of the panelists spoke today. And it kind of set me aback a little bit because, some of us, we've kind of, upped the gear in our rhetorics to counteract some of the, the critique, from the Weah-led government. But I think this has been, a really good show to somber some of us up and really see deeper than what's on the surface. In that regard, I think what most of the panelists said are true. And even though the show didn't go down that line today, I wanted to say something that might seem out of place. But in terms of the U.S., Liberia relationship, I think one of the high points for me, because I was in Liberia at the time, and that was more of a contemporary time rather than the historical, link between the two countries, was when, that ship that was coming to Liberia that the said John Taylor was bringing all his guns on was seized, was intercepted by the U.S. Navy. I think indirectly that saved a lot of lives, but I guess in the same breath we can say they started the conflict anyways, or they were behind it. But I think for me that was the high point, because looking back in hindsight, that saves thousands of Liberian lives. And then maybe the worst part of our history, again, in contemporary times, is my cousin who was in the Greystone compound who got hit by shrapnel and is deformed today, and all the other innocent bodies who were killed, and they had to lay the bodies in front of the United States Embassy. I think for me, in my short lifespan, that was the lowest, and I think a few days after that, President Bush called on Taylor to leave. So I kind of want to go down between some of the highs and lows from, Liberia emerging, relationship. But great show, and thank you for hosting it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me go to this wireless caller, 302 area code. Your name and where you calling from?
Yes, my name is Amos. Is that me?
Yes, Amos, go ahead, sir.
Yes, and I'm calling from Delaware. My problem is the inconsistency from the lady in the studio. I think that's the name, but she said she blamed the Americans for all of the troubles and the wars, the corruption that's going on in Liberia. But then in the same breath, she turned around and said, why Liberians are not doing it? Why Liberians are not doing that? The problem we Liberians have is we always shift the blame on other people. I'm telling you, we don't take responsibility for our problems. Americans give you money. Do you want them to go there again and use the money for you, build hospitals for you, feed you? I mean, that's a problem. She sounds like a lady that was educated here in America, but she still want to allude to the fact that Liberians have responsibility for all the problems that we're going through, the corruption, the crime rate. It's our responsibility. We should not shift the blame on the, since 1925 that, America colonized, so to speak, Liberia. I mean, so what? So if America does not feed us, that what to eat? If America does not show us how to use the money that they give us, we're not going to use it? I mean, that's just not right. We are responsible for our own problems.
Okay.
America gives money to other countries. Why don't they go there and direct them? Look, I'm speaking here. I work with the American government. I know that whenever they send the money, they don't direct how they, they don't tell you, they don't use the money for you. But they watch it, in case it's mismanagement, they do something about it.
So Amos, what you make Amos, what you make of the ambassador's statement?
The ambassador's statement was reckless in the first place because the Liberian government is corrupt.
All right.
And that was not his place. Trust me, if I was sitting with Mr. Makati, right now, I'm saying, Mr. Makati, you are meddling into Liberian politics. That's not his responsibility. He's not supposed to meddle in Liberian politics.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't really quite get the inconsistencies of a call that you talk about, but thank you.
Oh yeah, she blamed the American government for the American people for the corruption. Her portion of it where she blamed the American people. Oh, you people been doing this, been doing that. Thanks, Charlie King time. So are we going to go back to 1915 for what the Americans? Come on, man. We want to be responsible people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I got your point. Thank you. Let's go to one of our panelists here who's calling, Mr. Kalebo Gonglo. Mr. Gonglo, you're live.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. Good evening, guys. Yeah, I'm not listening to the show. It's a great show. I don't know why I was not on the show, but anyway, I just want to make a few points. I'm not going to be long. I listened to Cole. Cole was talking about corruption being an invention of Western country and even donors or engage in corruption when they get aid and what have you. I mean, I get all that point, but I grew in a village. If you look at how people live in African village, Africans are notoriously transparent and less corrupt in the villages. So I think it is greed and other motivation that people who serve in public service engage in corruption. Because in the village, you can leave your collar, you can drop on the farm road. That farm road that is being shared by maybe 2 or 3 different families. Somebody will take that collar and put it and hang it and say, we don't know who owns this collar. That's how in African villages, Africans are notoriously transparent and less corrupt, So, but that's a village life. So I just want to make that short comment. But what I see in Africa and by extension in Liberia, we've not had leaders that love the country. That's all. Because all of what we're discussing here, we can look on other African leaders. Like Julius Nyerere, when he died, they didn't find one bank account of Julius Nyerere in any European country. As a result, he could take any position on a global stage without any fear. But as soon as somebody becomes president of Liberia, you have money in insurance account, you have money in America, you got money, you got your account in Europe, all over you buying products. So, but we got Western powers here, we got this information on this guy. If we just expose him to his citizen, they're going to crucify him. So that's the first place to begin to take control of our leaders. Because our leaders come to power with the mind of stealing. And by the time it begins to steal, then the Western powers have control over them. Because they can reveal to the Indians, we are aware of actual data about you. Can we reveal that to your population? They will crucify you. So that's one. So all we need to do is, we don't need to go, it's good to know all these history, but we just need, moving forward, let's have leaders who will be patriotic, who will be less corrupt and ready to fight. Because if we begin to produce our staple food, it is great. It will begin to invest in our citizens and in our country in a way that is very smart. We will be okay to stand on the world stage and resist any temptation. Then suppose that call posted, I was just on this, Dennis, I know you want to take all the color.
Yes, please.
Then suppose that call me in the chat room about this guy talking about the rice production. I actually have actual life experience on this. I was sitting down when I was working for government at the ERC, Economic Revitalization Committee meeting, when we were formulating the PRS under L.M. Johnson Sirleaf. And that was one of the World Bank demands, that there was no need for Liberia to grow rice because you can import the rice cheap from Asia. That was their demand. Dr. Sai presided over that meeting. And we're like, what kind of policy is this? But that was what was pushed through L.M. Johnson Sirleaf government trust, that you don't just need to give rice importation contract. Otherwise, you grow the rice, you concentrate on other things, which I thought was a stupid idea. But that's what the government bought. And Dr. Duque even confirmed some of the things that Sirleaf, with all her education and experience, who succumbed to America's demand that China was coming to build a dam. They were going to build one in Patawi, in Monrovia, and China said they were building a power of supply for the entire country, not Monrovia. Sirleaf said, I chose Monrovia. That was one of the highest degree of being unpatriotic by President Sirleaf. She was very unpatriotic to Liberia at that moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gonglo. Callers, please. 1 minute should be more than enough. Let me bring on Darling Warwood. We have like 6 more callers, so let's be brief.
I will go really quick. So before Ambassador McCarthy can lecture us about
corruption, poverty, and what have you. We want people to know that what is going in Liberia is by design. The poverty, the underdevelopment, no infrastructure, everything is by design. America is fully aware. So when America was sending the free slaves to Liberia in 1821, they didn't send the good ones. They sent the uneducated ones.
Oh my God.
So labor. Let me go back to Ambassador McCarthy. Did he want to talk about
please do that because
yeah. So if he wants to talk about corruption, let America first start by paying the debt that they owe to Liberia. America supported Harvard Firestone, who went to Liberia and quote unquote bought 1 million acres of land for I don't know 1 cent or 2 cents per acre.
6 cents.
6 cents. They coerced the Liberian government, Charles D.B. King, who was an American Liberian. They coerced those people, took the people land for free, and enslaved the people on our land. And imagine, the ordinary rubber tappers that live in Firestone, the houses don't have windows, they don't have light and water. Here in the United States, a house or a room will not be considered a room where it doesn't have a window. But they went to Liberia and practiced that there. So if Ambassador McCarthy wants to preach corruption or preach democracy to us, let us start by paying our debt.
Thank you.
Because everything, look, give me a little more time. What is going Liberia that, like, I want to make mention of the death of William Arrow Jr. Only America and Israel knew the code to enter the private residence of the president of Liberia at that executive mansion. Those seeming little boys, they didn't know anything whatsoever to enter that mansion. So they get that record straight. America has always supported dictators because why? They do their dirty work. Do you know what William V.S. Thomas stayed in power for 27 years? Because they hired them to destabilize whatever plan they had in order for the unity of Africa not to work. That's why the French supported Philip Oppose-Bayen in that coup d'etat. He was in power for almost 30 years. Once you are willing to do that dirty work, they will support you. They also supported those for 10 years. They killed William Harold Thomas and took the little boy and threw them in there and said, y'all go and call yourself a coup and all that kind of stuff. Though was supported, he was nurtured. Why? Because he was doing that dirty work. By the time he went to school and gained knowledge and his eyes opened and he knew his left from his right, they were, oh no, this guy is no longer for us. What happened? They also need to tell us how Taylor left from a Plymouth prison in Massachusetts to travel by way of Mexico to Ghana and unleash, carnage on Liberian people in 1989. Taylor did not break you. America need to also tell us how Taylor walked out of that Plymouth prison in Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a whole lot. Mr. Thomas Cannon. Mr. Cannon, you're live. Go ahead, sir. 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Dennis. I think one of those things that we have to accept is our country comes through a history that is contested. It comes through a history that perhaps is different from many other countries in Africa. But I think one of the things that have to be said is that outside the West, every other developing world have these challenges, whether it's in Latin America, whether it is in Africa, whether it's in the Middle East. We all come out of that history of suppression from the West. But we've been able to see other countries move beyond that to be able to build a society that is inclusive and that support the dignity of their people. I think what we've now seen in Liberia is for us to be able to follow that pattern. And I think, to me, things are changing nowadays. The way things were during the Cold War, the way things were during the 1970s and 80s, it has changed. To this day and age, what are we doing to be able to reduce corruption, to move our people forward? I think it's a bigger question that we should be asking ourselves, like some of the panelists were saying. Because it is often said that if you don't sell yourself, the street does not buy you. Even the Liberian government behaves as if it is a charge for other foreign governments. Imagine in 2019, we printed our own currency. We got it in the country. Some of our own citizens came outside and said the money is missing. We ran to the U.S. embassy to go and ask them to come and look for our own money, our own country. They have to put up a report and say, oh, no money got missing. But the report they put out was a redacted report. That means they kept one for themselves and put one for the Liberian people. That was the only way people could go and see them. They say, oh, the Americans say the money is not missing. Money that is meant to be in our wallet, and we should know where it is. Everything that happens in that country, everybody there, we work in the government. What is it we can do in that country without asking the World Bank, the USAID, and EU to support? So where is the sovereignty that we are talking about? We don't do anything for ourselves. We develop the PADD, we go to Ghana for a meeting, and someone from the MFDP is saying, we brought you here to present this plan to you because we know you, the donors, are going to fund it. We never act as a sovereign country. And so when anybody come and say anything to us, it's because of ourselves. And I think the other point to make is that you were asking, just give me a few seconds, you were asking a question about what has changed under this regime. Even the ambassador, Linda Thomas Briefly, we are praising that. She never used to say this. She's at the UN, and you listen to the speech that she made about corruption in Liberia. On our 200-day celebration, an ambassador to the president of the US, you know what she said to us. So I think there has been something that has fundamentally changed from 2018 that making the ambassador to behave the way he's behaving. And if you follow his confirmation hearing from from Washington D.C. before he went, he said he was going to fight not corruption but the perception of corruption. So I don't think the ambassador is just doing that because he wants to do it. It must be part of the U.S. foreign policy. But to me, the point is we are the ones causing this problem for ourselves. So why is it that the U.S. is corrupt but they've managed to build this kind of society with all the corruption? We can't do anything. No water, no electricity, nothing. The history is there. But Rwanda, Tanzania, they've gone beyond this history and they have built better society. We need to stand up and do something for ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. And Thomas is asking, the money in our own pocket, we're going to ask somebody to find it for us. When they say it's not missing, we agree. William Jala, you're live. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you, Dennis Jha. Thank you, Mr. Jha, for allowing me to participate in the show. Great show indeed. I want to say hi to you and your panelists.
Thank you.
I want to, without any delay, I want to quickly delve into the comment of the U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Malcolm McCarthy. I want to say that his comment was very irresponsible, appalling, ridiculous, to say the least. What I saw him doing was throwing a monkey wrench into the Liberian democratic process. He overstepped his bounds. It is not within his bounds as a U.S. diplomat, to lash at diaspora Liberians for voicing their frustration against their government, their tyrannical government, their despotic government. All right? What he did in essence was to try to defend a rogue government, a rogue regime. If Ambassador McCarthy wants to help the Liberian people, the Liberia, we appreciate what he needs to fight, to help the Liberian people fight corruption in our country, fight against brutality and the excesses of the Weah regime. Instead of accusing fingers at diaspora Liberians and diaspora media platform for destroying institutions of Nigeria. Doesn't he see what the government itself is doing? All of the excesses, all of the violations, violating the rules of law each and every day. Doesn't he see those things as problems? That the real administration is since the inception of the real administration. It has embarked upon crises and ills that tend to threaten the very peace
of the country. Doesn't he see that? Doesn't Dr. McCarthy see those things as problems, as potential problems that could derail the peace of Liberia?
Thank you.
And push the country into another chaos?
Thank you. Thank you.
The only thing he's concerned about is Liberians in the diaspora who are frustrated about their relatives being killed and with no accountability, with no justice for the victim. Why will he speak out to some of these CEOs?
Thank you, William.
Why will he speak out again? Why he's speaking out against the $100 million drug bags?
Thank you.
The $40 million drug bag.
Thank you, William. Thank you.
Why did he speak against those things?
Thank you. Thank you. Let's take our next caller here. That's Elizabeth Julu. Is that Elizabeth? Go ahead. You're live.
Hello?
Oh, that's nice. Elizabeth. Your name and where you calling from?
David. I'm David. I'm calling from Brandon, Florida.
Go ahead, David.
Can you? Oh, okay. I just want to say thank you to all of you. A brilliant program tonight. Well, you see, here's the problem for me. You know, Liberia is asking for people like the ambassador to talk to us the way he did. You see, if you want something, you have to work hard for it, and you have to put it in place. If you want your country to be a developed country and be considered, you know, on par with other countries, then you have to work at it. You see, we put corrupt people in power, and we glorify them like that one of the panelists said, and that's the truth. We never hold them accountable for the things that they do. You see, but at the same time, we want for the American people to respect us. But we have to first of all respect ourselves. You see, to say it's been a long time now, since 18-something. Okay, we have grown to a level now where we demand, not begging you now, because we have the education. We've been educated, not 1821 or 1822. This is the 20th century, 21st century. We have qualified Liberians. So people need to stand up for what is right. Education is key to all of this. You see, it's not just the few of us that are fortunate to be on this side, but our people back home. For instance, there's coming election. How many of you people really know the importance of electing someone for 6 years, 9 years, 12 years, whatever the duration is? If you carry a bag of rice and maybe a bottle of clean juice, that's all they want from you, and they put you in power. But the thing that follows after that, they don't understand that. So people will be educated to these things.
Thank you, David.
Should I just be talkers? We talk a lot, but we do very little. We do very little. We talk. We are good talkers, but we need to put action behind what we talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We have more callers, so please be brief. Bedu, Trekam Bedu, is that the name? 317 Iroko. You're live.
Yeah, thank you, panel. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to say that I follow this show, I follow your programs on a consistent basis. I want to say a special shout out to Cole. Cole, you're one of the Liberian ladies that I really admire. Your intelligence is great. Your knowledge about Liberia is inspiring. I want to talk about this issue with Liberia and the United States relationship. First of all, I want to disagree with one of the callers that said that the United States census so elected people to Liberia to form the country. I want to disagree with that. That's not true.
No, that's not true.
If you follow the history of our country, you will know that that did not happen. But I want to say that I am just so happy, and I'm going to sleep so sound tonight about this show, because I've been one of the Liberians have been advocating and talking to people that the United States does not really love our country. They undermine us every step of the way. Everything we try to do, the United States will find some way to undermine us. Now, see what they're doing in recent times with this ambassador. He's coming in and he's forgetting about his role He's muddying our politics. He's making statements to undermine our government. He put a statement on the United States website, Liberia is not safe, do not fly to Liberia. All of that is just undermining the country. But our people do not realize some of these things that we discussed here tonight. And if you went to Liberia and tell a typical Liberian man and say, look, the United States doesn't love Liberia, man, they would just want to boo you out of that. And first thing a Liberian man would say, oh, that man, you come from America, he ain't know nothing, man. In fact, if America doesn't love Liberia, then why are you doing in America? That's a typical Liberian man with accurate. So sometimes we try to have the conversation with people, look, observe the American policies of Liberia. And then you'll be able to effectively determine whether the United States really cared about Liberia. Yeah. It's not what you hear them say with lip talk. What is the foreign aid to Liberia in the first place compared to other African countries? I'm not going to go to Israel because I say that's Israel. But look at the aid they get to Kenya compared to Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Broder.
Look at that. I want my fellow Liberians to really look into that. I think this program is so unique tonight, and I just want to say thank you very much. I hope the Liberian people will try to follow the kind of program we get ourselves educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We got 3 more callers. Let's be very brief. Dr. Batum Kula, Oliver, and then Eugene. Dr. Kula.
Yes. Basically, we Liberians, like the other gentleman said, we talk a lot, but we really do nothing of substance. We sat there, Lamco and all our iron ore was fine and depleted when we were no longer of importance. Our regime was changed, and we're sitting there again. The Turkish are coming, depleting our gold from all the areas that they're mining. Weah, the young gentleman, I don't know where he came from. He depleted all the diamonds that were there. And we continue this from one generation to another. We're now concerned about what the ambassador says. What does it do? I mean, in the end, if any trouble comes, America will be the one spending their money to clean up the mess. So he has all right to warn those in the diaspora that are saying things and throwing more gasoline in a fire. And I think who he directed that talk to was Jerome Verdia. What he's doing is wrong. As somebody who was once PRC chairman, you have to be careful what you put out there and how you put it out there, especially if you're not using words like allegedly or according to my sources, but you just talk to some average person on waterside throwing gossip as if it was stock. So we have to be very careful with that. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Oliver, quickly.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. You're live.
Thank you for having me, Paul, Mr. Sharif, Mr. Mohammed Sharif. I just had a little team of Mr. Mohammed Sharif. For what Cole has said and also stated with the history and everything that Americans have been doing for us or to us, you still try to be against where this is the time that we Liberians are supposed to come together and say, oh, you say wrong thing to us. But at the end of the day, this Mr. Weah, I don't know what he did to you. Everything you're making it as personal. When we on the other hand supposed to stay together to tell the people, say, listen, this is our history you took for us, and we know what you did for us or did to us, and we need restitution for that. But you, Mama Sherry, I don't know where you're going to flip-flop, brother. Wherever you are, you do a good job. But Cole, Doctor, and Mr. Sherry, you guys are doing a good job. And even though I've been pinned for the few days of not coming on physical focus on Liberia, but I'm happy to be back here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Let's hear from Eugene Hammer. Eugene, you live. Maybe I got a wrong name here. 816 area code.
Yeah, hello?
Yeah, your name and where you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Eugene Hammer. I call it from Kansas City, Missouri.
Go ahead, Eugene.
Yeah, thank you for the show, Mr. John.
I really want to appreciate Sis Cole, man. I really enjoy the way she talks and she brings out his story. This has been our problem. For Mr. Sharif, the Open Center, our problem just started in 2018. The attack on last person, we are not at the video, get his name. He didn't do nothing. Those people have been our problem in Liberia today up to that now. But you guys behave like our people just started with George to be president. You know, the guy was talking about polarization. Look, listen to the quarter when they call. When Ambassador comes to talk about social, the diaspora emerging, the diaspora Liberia, all the shocked and screaming. Bring more social. Because they don't want to make that they are all mad and all their feelings. Don't abuse her. The Syria is something worse about our own country. When last you see American people talk about our country? When you see American people talk bad about our own country? They always promote their country, but our diaspora Liberia. Our problem is the diaspora emerging. Liberia emerging in America. That's Liberia's problem. We need to change our attitude. Liberia is all we got. And let's make it better for ourselves and our children to come.
Thank you.
But we're sitting in America here and show all the West and say that, bro, it's a no-go zone. Go where is Chicago? Go in that neighborhood and let them know. Go in that neighborhood, Pennsylvania and New Jersey there. Stop. 100 people die over everything, but don't talk about it. Over 2% die in Liberia is a big story.
Thank you. Maybe because Liberia population is smaller than America. But thank you so much for calling.
We're talking about killing.
Yeah.
We're talking about population.
Yeah. They're killing, right? Thank you, Eugene. Thank you. Let me take my last caller. That's Hassan. Hassan, you have 30 seconds, please. We want to close.
That is how you call it, like Greg was it, I did last. But listen, I want people hit accountability. I'm gonna say I want people. I'm not just talking about like Black people. Black people as a whole, we always got this mentality. Listen to all your callers. Everything Cole saying is true, but what we do, we use it as an excuse to justify the way we are today. We can change those things because everything that the white people ever did to us, we know. They wrote it down in books. We're not seeing it in movies. We're not seeing it everywhere, and we see it play out in front of us. Guess what we do? We make excuses, right? And say, oh, it's because of this, we aren't to where we're supposed to be. We got to stop making excuses for our actions or for the things that have been happening to us. The Chinese people don't make excuses no more. The Japanese don't make excuses. The Asians aren't making excuses. Even in the Middle East now. Things happen. But you conquer it. We already know it happened. The key thing is, what do we do about it? Instead of us just looking for history and pulling things that happened 200-300 years ago. Now we know that these people don't like us. We know that they have done things to suppress us. Yes, we do. So now, what do we do? Instead of dwelling on these things. But thank you again, and I don't want to use my 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are the callers, and let me put a few comments there. Call and Mohammed, somebody had problem with you here laughing, but this one from Sam Wallace said, if the ambassador had been Liberia from 2006 through today, putting the spotlight on corruption in the way that he has, Liberia would be far better off now, and I suspect the TRC will have been implemented. That's one more. Okay, then Tobasi said the opposition is mad at the U.S. ambassador for speaking the truth. Dave said calls the star of the show tonight based on the caller's assessment. Congratulations. But Dave, wait. Judge Dumba doesn't see it that way. He said, Call and Mohammed do not take us seriously. What's funny? He said they're laughing. So don't be too. All right. So those are the callers. Let me have Mohammed respond to our callers, and then we're going to go to our Tabata session. Time is way fast. Mohammed, 1 minute. The callers call your name a lot.
Yeah. You know, they usually invoke my name when it comes to these kinds of touchy subjects, but listen. So I have said that, and I'm surprised that even Gonglo kind of, implied that, well, history is not important. Let's just talk about the future. You have, so people who think like that, it's wrong. You have to look at history. You have to look at where you were to know where you're going. How are we going to know where we're going if we don't know where we came from? So let's not, sit in this old mentality of dismissing what has happened before. We have to know what happened before. So, but to the point about, just being critical of the government, I think that what I try to do at all times is to hold myself accountable, to hold all of us accountable, to hold the leadership accountable. We all have certain standards, Dennis. Dennis, I have filed my financial disclosure. I work for the state government of Pennsylvania. I am obligated to file annual financial disclosure. Otherwise, I'll go to jail. We go to jail for not filing a financial disclosure in the state of Pennsylvania. How in the world that the president of the Republic of Liberia cannot declare his asset? This man who was who was very poor by his own admission. Now he's the richest, he's among the richest people in Africa. This is inexcusable to me. How is it that the likes of Akaris Gray and all these people who are poor guys walking in the streets of Monrovia, how is it that they are the wealthiest people in 4 or 5 years? This is inexcusable. So all these people sitting around here in the United States, you can sit here. It's easy to sit here and say, leave these people alone. But these people are damaging us. They're damaging our country. They're damaging our continent. They're damaging our self-esteem as Black people. And that invites the United States ambassador to come and talk to us in the way that he does. I don't want to see that. I don't want to ever see that. I don't want us to borrow from China. I don't want us to borrow from the United States. I don't want us to borrow from anybody. I want us to be ourselves, to be really, really independent, but we're not, because we have people who are incompetent. We have people who don't know what they're doing. And meanwhile, you have a chorus of people like this lined up for a bag of rice, lined up for $5 and $10 United States bill to vote for them. And that's what we have, the problem that we have now.
All right. Call Mohammed took all the minute for response. So we'll go to our Tabata session now. So let's do our Tabata, and we start with Call for your Tabata of the week. If you can unmute.
Okay. Dennis, please give me 30 seconds to respond.
Right. Okay, 30.
So blaming the African leaders is a common thing. That's what everyone does. I mean, nobody wants to blame the West. Everyone's afraid to blame the West. The most common thing is to blame African leaders, which is correct. However, African leaders are like a spider web, and the West is the spider spinning the web. So we're not going to be able to solve the issue if we pretend there's not a spider spinning the web. This is not history. We're still living in an imperialist world. It's now economic imperialism is constantly shift changing, but to sit and not look at what is the source and what's benefiting from the problem will never solve the problem. If you go to the doctor, the first thing they ask you, what is your medical history? You cannot solve a country's problem without looking at the history of the country, understanding how it got here and diagnosing the problem. We have to do that. And once we do, we can solve it. My Tabata of the week, of course, is this guy, once again, Mr. Trumpist, racist McCarthy coming up here behaving like, colonial Governor Buchanan. At least Buchanan was working with Roberts to snuff out the slave trade in the vicinity of the settlement. This guy is bribing the slave traders. So let him get up in here. And in fact, I would say what we should do as Liberians who hold, people of Liberian descent who hold American citizenship, we should petition to have this guy replaced by either an open-minded and intelligent white American or an African American who understands Liberian is going to respect Liberian people. We don't have to take this. And I would call out to Liberians to join with us, put your voice, call Senator Warnock, whatever state you live in, and say, look, listen to what this guy said. We want him recalled and replaced.
Thank you. Dr. Duke, what's your Tabata of the week?
Tabata, give me 30 seconds also. I want to respond to this guy who said corruption, who was wrong. When Farasum came in with 1 million acres taken, it was all forest. They needed thousands of young people to work on the farm every single day, and they were not getting paid. The chief were told, you bring us this or you're going to go to this. And what happened, because all the young people were taken to go work on the plantation. There was nobody was doing the food production. That's how we got addicted to pusawa, that broken rice. They brought it cheap to us to eat because all the young people were taken onto work for fast food. And that's a reality. I met a professor when I was at LU. A colleague told me blank. He said, "Oh, rice can grow in Liberia." This is some person who was sent by the U.S. government. He worked for the U.S. government. She was she would do research at the university. He would I said, "What do you mean rice can grow?" I said, "Grass can grow here. Why can rice can grow?" He said, "Well, and then she went into the theories. I look at her. I said, "Are you serious?" She said, "Yeah, we have done research." I said, "You and who? You and Farastone?" She laughed and she left. But that's my Tabata. I don't want to take more time.
No, you didn't get your Tabata yet.
My Tabata is Mr. McCarthy. I think he has eaten enough potato green Liberia. Maybe he needs a change of scenery and maybe he needs to go someplace else. I think, ambassadors who insult a whole nation. It's not because he's talking about the diaspora. He talked about Liberia. This is not the first time. Either we like it or not, I think the U.S. need to recall him.
Thank you. Mr. Ahmed, I have to be fair here and give you your 30 seconds before your Tabata. Mr. Salif.
Well, thank you. I like the question about what do we do now? What do we move forward, right? I think it was one of the callers, Thomas Cannon, and another one. The other countries were colonized. They all experienced the same thing as Liberia, and they've managed to move forward. That's kind of what I was saying earlier. That you have to figure out how do you diversify? How do you educate the people, move away, and make yourself strategically important and competitive, so that America will take you seriously. So that's my 30 seconds there. In terms of Tabata, just the University of Liberia. I mean, this is not a merit or demerit of what happened on the campus, but just the militancy that I see of the students, of the campus environment, and having taught there myself for more than 5 years, the whole time I was working in Liberia. I just know that the school has so much need, right? That the young people are now receiving the kind of caliber of education that Liberia really needs in order to move forward. Some of the growth and development that we're calling for. That should be training ground. Yes, universities serve different purposes, right? It can be a community, a conscience of a society, all of that. I'm not diminishing any of that, but I'm just saying the sheer militant nature of everybody, from speeches they deliver, how they behave, the kind of politicization of everything. I think it's taking really over the education mission of the students and of the university itself.
Thank you. Mohammed, your Tabata of the week.
Yes. So before I get there, so Barton Kula made a point, which is,
Mr.
I think,
Sharif, I thought you use all the time to respond to the
just 15 seconds. Trust me. So I think Dr. Kula made a point which is important. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a good thing to put out a wild accusation out there that you don't have proof, because the ambassador did say when law enforcement asked them, he wasn't specific. So who did they ask? So Dennis, it's interesting. So maybe you can try to get some of these people on the show who were investigated and that they didn't have proof, so that we can know. I mean, some of us want to know that. So I thought that was important. So my Tabata of the week. I think it started like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. where Jefferson Kweji and Molba Molu, they're using this word Billy Wick. All of them, all the CDC people seem to be using Billy Wick. Like, where did that come from now? Like, that's the new CDC term. Oh, this is within the Billy Wick of my so and so. And then I heard Molba Molu said this is within the Billy Wick. So I thought it was funny, interesting as well, that these guys can all take the same word, even though they probably don't know the meaning of it, and they can't say well. Nobody can ever say the word well, and and they just saying it all over the place. So I thought that was interesting. There are other things, but I will save that for next week.
Thank you. A few of our callers here are commenting their Tabata as well. And before that, my Tabata is on LU campus, especially the Student Unification Party, singing wartime songs. I stayed in the war for a long time, and I felt it. In fact, my entire life was shaped as a result of the war. So anytime, maybe that's part of my trauma too. But anytime I hear these songs, and the songs they used to sing in Taylor territory was, anybody who don't want Taylor would treat them like a dog. And now to hear soup, Student Unification Party say, because when Yeke came, or Representative Koluba, they say anybody who doesn't want Koluba would treat them like dog. These are students, university students. And also there's a song that they used to sing, the rebels used to sing too. I'm talking about flesh-eating rebels. Used to sing that Sekou, when Lord Rebel came to move Taylor, so the song was Sekou that man, Taylor that woman. So when I hear Student Unification Party singing this, I see that's complete Tabata, and not just Tabata, but dangerous. Stanley says, my Tabata of this week is the escape of self-proclaimed General Gray from the real General Yeke.
There you go.
David Julu, my Tabata is people wanting respect, but they don't respect themselves. Talking about, I believe, wanting respect from McCarthy. Houston Brooks, he said, my Tabata of the week is a Carlos Gray going for lunch when the cafeteria was closed. Even 404 was closed. Emmanuel Brown, my Tabata is hearing call formula saying that the United States of America should pay reparation to Liberia and Liberia. This is laughable. Can you believe that? It's a reparation.
I mean, what is laughable about that? I mean, people, all Africans, all these people, Europeans, all these people, they owe a lot to Africa. And that's something that we don't even talk about enough.
Hassan Famula, my Tabata of the week is the president of UL wants student politics, or want to stop student politics.
Right.
That's to Hassan, that's complete Tabata.
Wow.
And keep your Tabata coming. This one is from Dr. Kula. My Tabata is all the nonsense that is Liberian governance. Arthur Doe, my Tabata is the sellout of Dr. Nelson's wanton display of suspending student politics. It may sound like soup. All right. I want to remind you that FOL programming continues. And by the way, this is not a boast, but we do the best programming ever in the history of Liberian television. We have shows like the History Channel, the Literature show. We have the Business and Economics show. We have politics with the Political Bulldog, the Hour of Politics. We have a show like Tough Talking Thursday, which cannot be compared with any show ever in the history of Liberian television. I mean, don't take my word for it. Go out there and see. We have the Noonday that talk about women issue and all these gender inequalities and everything in between. Where else can you find that? Only here at Focus on Liberia. This Friday, we're going to have a debate, and this is the only place we have debate. And we have people from partisan and non-partisan background coming. The new pension law has been passed in the Senate, This is I call it the pension for big shots only. Violence at UL. The lights at the Capitol building went off, and President Weah vetoed some of these election law. Join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. for Friday night debate. Before that, at 6, we have the literary hour with Professor K. Moses Nabwe and the scholar Jackie Sayer. Saturday at 3 p.m., we're going to gauge the economic pulse of Liberia on the Business and Economic Forum. That's the FOL Marketplace. How is the economy of Liberia doing, and what are some of the things we're going to look at to determine if our economy is doing well or not so well? Join us at 3 p.m. for FOL Marketplace. And then at 7 on Saturday, we're going to talk about the Bassa people, Bassa 360, a historic narration of Bassa from 1461 to 1821. Of course, Carl, Famule, and Jabari will be here to present that. And the host for the show, we're going to have a Bassa man. The unabashed sedition, Jerome Gilman, will be here, not as a sedition, but as a Bassa man to talk about Bassa. Keep watching Focus on Liberia, and I promise you will love it. And we really appreciate those who are following and those who are donating to our fund drive to have a big radio station in Liberia that is going to broadcast from Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, from the top of the Wologizi to Sister City. We want these programs to be in Liberia, and I promise you, if you support us, we're going to be there before the elections to bring it live and balanced the way you love it. Well, I want to thank you, lady and gentlemen, for the show tonight, for your time. We way past our time, but you're still here. I really, really appreciate your time. I want to appreciate our callers, those who are watching, and even those who will watch later. Let me get your 35 seconds of closing so that we can call it a day. Let's start with Mr. Sharif.
Dennis wanted me to go fast, so I've said everything that I needed to say. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank fellow panelists. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Duke.
Same thing here. I think we have said enough. And if people listen, I think we have probably covered everything. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And it was a pleasure to join you tonight. And I look forward to more of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. More comments here. Say thank you. Also, Hassan say he's going to support. Yes, I don't want to forget, On Point is every Sunday at 4, where you got Mr. Gilman, Mr. Padman, Mr. Eastman. They cannot do it so well. Mr. Salif.
Yeah, just to thank you. To re-echo what everybody has said, diplomacy is about strategic interest. We have to make ourselves strategic. We have to look beyond, just one country and make that country compete for our attention and compete for our partnership. To do that, we have to cultivate ourselves, our leaders, our institutions, our people, and look inward to try to build our country.
Thank you. Carl, you got the last word.
Yes, so thank everybody for watching. This was beautiful. I love all of the comments from all of the callers. And I just want to say that history is everything. It gives context to the present. It lets you understand why the world is organized the way it is. And until you understand why it's organized the way it is, you cannot correct your position in it. This Saturday, we are going to be talking about King Peter Basol from the early 1700s, and his son, who went to England to go to school. And we're going to talk about things that most of us don't know anything about, which is our own history. So please tune in this Saturday. It's going to be amazing. Go to the YouTube and Facebook and look at the Liberian History Channel episodes. Those are the things that are going to give you the context you need to understand how far we've fallen, but more importantly, how far we have actually come. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to Saturday. I hope all of you watch on Saturday as well.
Thank you so much, Carl. Yes, you heard it from Carl. let me remind you again that every Friday, tomorrow Friday at 6 p.m., we have the literary hour. That's literature. That's what we do here. And then Tuesday at 7 p.m., we have our health show. That's the only health show on the network and on most networks. That's Abby Tyler's Healthy Living. Last Tuesday or this week, Tuesday, it was about the gap or the dichotomy, how medicine and science, how do they coexist or they are at loggerheads. And that was a beautiful, beautiful show. You don't want to miss that. Again, thank you for watching. Always, we end our song by saying our program by playing the song that says, "We are all Liberians." Whether you believe McCarthy said the right thing, and or not, we are all Liberians. What we all need to strive to do now is to make our country the glorious land of liberty. Good night, and God bless you.
We all Liberians.